Welcome to All the Best, an interview series with UNL Orca awardees, where UNL means University of Nebraska Lincoln, and Orca is the Outstanding Research and Creativities Award, which is UNL's top award. In Gerda Lerner's book, Why History Matters, she explains the life stories give meaning to the present and the future because we identify what is important to us. And she says, our stories show how we are interconnected in a particular time and place. As for this interview series, Orca awardees have experiences that reach back more than a half a century, which will give us a personal view of how the best research emerged from UNL. It is my pleasure to revive this interview from 1980 with Norman Cromwell. He and Bernice Sloat were the inaugural Orca awardees in 1978. Pete Boughn did the interview at the University of Nebraska Medical Center in Omaha. He asked about Cromwell's history, but mostly about his time as director of the Eppley Cancer Center. The interview is reproduced with permission from the UNMC McGoogan Library. Here's a brief bio. Cromwell was born in 1913 in Terre Haute, Indiana. In 1935, he earned a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering from the Rose-Hulman Institute of Technology in his hometown. In 1939, three things happened. He earned a doctorate in organic chemistry from the University of Minnesota, he got married, and he was hired as an instructor at the University of Nebraska. He quickly rose through the ranks to become full professor. After World War II, his lab began synthesizing a class of compounds that had possible medicinal properties, including as anti-cancer agents. These compounds brought a lot of attention to his work. In the 1960s and 70s, Cromwell served as chair of the chemistry department, vice president of graduate education, and, unexpectedly, director of the Eppley Institute for Research in Cancer and Allied Diseases in Omaha. With that, I'm happy to post this interview of Norman Cromwell from 1980.
University of Nebraska on the Lincoln campus, and currently acting director of the Eppley Cancer Institute at the Medical Center in Omaha. Dr. Cromwell is probably one of the most distinguished scientists in the university, been there for many years. And if we went into all the national and international honors and accomplishments, we'd run out of tape, Dr. Cromwell. So we're going to kind of focus on your relationship with the Medical Center. And you tell me, because you were on how long have you been with the university?
I've been there since 1939.
That's a
Came
considerable
in as an instructor
in
of chemistry.
And you were department chairman when? Were you
became department chairman in '64 and remained department chairman until 1970 when I became executive dean for graduate studies and research for the system.
Right. Now, what was your first contact officially with the Medical Center?
Well, Pete, I think the first one might be during my service as an elected member of the Graduate Council. This would have been certainly back in the early 1960s, right close to 1960, I suspect. And the Graduate Council in those days in Lincoln, of course, also was in charge of any graduate work that might go on at the Medical Center, because the graduate dean was the graduate dean for graduate work in both the Medical Center. It was then, of course, simply called the Medical College.
Because it was the Medical Center in those days was a college of the university.
Right. Under the
Chancellor.
Administration of the Chancellor,
Right.
whose home was in Lincoln.
Right.
Well, the Medical College had a department of medical biochemistry at that time under the chairmanship of Dr. Jacoby. And these people decided that besides granting master's degrees, maybe they, in medical biochemistry, were ready to be considered for the right to grant the PhD. And this would then become the first PhD in the medical college, as I recall.
No PhDs before.
No PhDs at that time. And oh, go ahead.
Well, how would, it occurred to me, how would a PhD anatomist, for instance, he would not have got a PhD from the College of Medicine years before then? Or?
You will need to check this. But
yeah.
In any case, this was one of the very early PhDs. Lots of master's degrees were granted up here. But you check. In any case, I was asked to chair a committee to examine the qualifications of medical biochemistry to be considered to grant a PhD in medical biochemistry. And we had a lot of conversations with members of the staff. And I remember one of the things I said to Dr. Jacoby, which I was not sure they were going to go for, was that if he hoped that the Graduate Council in Lincoln would look favorably upon their request, one of the things he'd better be sure of was that they agreed in the plans they sent forward that all candidates that they would accept would have at least a year's training in organic chemistry and a year in physical chemistry. Now, I make a point of this because the graduate students that they were taking in at that time in medical biochemistry,
yes,
for the master's degree, did not, most of them have that difficult to obtain year of training in physical chemistry. This is difficult. They would have one semester, yes, but not 2 semesters, not the whole year.
Now, was that resisted for a bit, or?
It was resisted by some of the members of medical biochemistry, but I warned them that this would be the key to their success. And Dr. Jacoby bought it right away. He said, you've really helped us. You've given us a clue as to how to get in the door.
Right.
And I said, I'm going to predict that if you do that, you'll make it, because the chemists will immediately be for it. I will be for it. The chemistry department will say, yeah, it'll be sent to them to judge this, and they will be for it, because that's considered the minimum, the necessary requirement. Because if you have that, then you have all the rest that goes with it. Proper training in inorganic, analytical chemistry, and so forth. If you have that year of organic and that year of physical chemistry. They assume that the biochemistry that these people will have can actually be taught in the medical college. Well, by golly, it went through flying, and they were very happy. Dr. Jacoby was very pleased, and so was his staff, that they were going to now be allowed to recruit candidates for the first time for a PhD in medical biochemistry. Now, whether or not this is absolutely the first PhD up here, I don't know. You better check.
Could well be, but we'll check out.
You check it.
All right. Was there any resistance from the Lincoln faculty standpoint to setting up a PhD?
Yes. I mean, some of my friends said, Norm, you're selling us out. And I said, gentlemen, they are also needed.
Yes.
This is not a duplication of what we're doing. Oh, well, they will attract some of our candidates. And I said, all right, get into the fray, the competition.
But you look at it now, it would be logical that a PhD in medical science, you virtually have to take it here.
Right. Yeah, in medical biochemistry, the emphasis should be different. And in general, throughout the years, that's been true. There's been a very significant difference. The boys down there will say, yes, there sure has been. They get more of the money than we do. Well, that's the way life is, I guess, maybe.
You know, what the process took, 6 months, a year? How long does a process like that take?
It probably took a year at least.
Right.
For it to really finally be culminated and passed by the Graduate Council. And then this was submitted to the entire graduate faculty and had to be found acceptable to them upon our recommendation, and it went through. Not without some opposition, but it passed, and that always pleased me very much.
Yes.
That was my first. And it did probably, it certainly broadened my understanding of the university and increased the number of friends that I had throughout what we now call the system.
Right.
Far beyond what it
You
was
made a
then.
few friends at the university,
Yes,
or at
I
the
did.
medical center,
certainly
I
did.
imagine. Dr. Cromwell, things at the university kind of changed. We've had several big periods of change.
Right.
But if I recall, back in 1961, if I'm right on this, there was sort of a new organizational structure for the university. It included, you remember Roy Holly.
Yes.
He came from the medical center, I believe.
Yes.
And
Became dean of the graduate college.
dean of the graduate college for the whole university.
Yes.
But wasn't that, he had some relationship to the professional schools too, didn't he? Was he not dean of the graduate college and professional school,
Well,
or
the
professional education?
schools in Lincoln, of course, if they grant the doctorate degree, have to report to the graduate dean.
Right.
And so, in that respect, the engineering college, of course, all of the degrees that they would grant that were doctorate degrees or master's degree have to be done through the graduate college. I had a very close relationship with Roy Holly. He and I became very fast friends, and we pulled one of the biggest deals that's ever been pulled.
Tell us about it.
At the University of Nebraska. Well, Hardin, who was a real builder, and was our chancellor then, knew about the National Science Foundation's Program of Excellence, and he decided that maybe we should have one of those big awards that the National Science Foundation were setting up. This was in response to Vannevar Bush's recommendation that what this country needed was about 30 more first-class universities doing high-level graduate work. At least 30 more needed to be identified to go along with the some 20 or 30 that already existed.
Mhm.
And that those universities should be identified, certain departments in them, and given so-called excellence awards. Actually, in my book, they were always better called Science Development Awards. Well, to make what was a fairly long story, but a very interesting one, shorter, Hardin had decided that the application should be put in that would cover chemistry, physics, and engineering, all in the same request. He invited several of us to go with him to discuss the matter in Washington. And we had this conversation in Washington and determined that, in their opinion, only chemistry and physics could be considered at all at that moment, that engineering had not yet done enough in the way of research.
Been built up.
So we went home and worked up a proposal seeking funds from the National Science Foundation to apply for one of these awards in chemistry and physics. Well, what happened was that at that stage, it was decided with the National Science Foundation that only chemistry was really ready for such an award. And we had something else going for us at the same time that caused the National Science Foundation to read the World Herald every week, at least the Sunday issue, to see how we were doing. This other thing was that chemistry, I was then chairman of the department, had become chairman of the department. Chemistry had applied to the university administration for a new building. We put in an application with Hardin's blessing, of course, for a brand new building of chemistry. Originally we had thought we would add square feet to the old Avery laboratory, but it was determined that we should really shoot for bear. We went for a big 250,000 square foot brand new building that was going to cost in the neighborhood of $1.5 million to be the most expensive building built in the university since the State House, all for one department.
Mhm.
Hardin was a real dreamer. The university, the legislature, in their wisdom, voted $5.5 million for that building, and we got the rest of it from Washington, from the U.S. Office of Education. All of this was going on at the same time. This is what's known as having two balls in the air all at once.
Mm-hmm.
So they read the World Herald, the people at NSF, to see how we were coming with the legislature here.
Yes.
And the legislature kept checking with the NSF to see how well we were doing on our Excellence Award, and we got them both at the same time. In 1967 this happened. So in one fell swoop, chemistry had a brand new building and an Excellence Award with the help of Roy Holly. I always said this was certainly excellent payment for any friendship I might have shown to the medical center. We got $830,000.
You're referring, in fact, Roy Holly came
Roy
out of the
Holly.
medical center.
Yes.
He was an obstetrician, I recall.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, he was.
Now, what that position, or whether it was that position or Roy Holly himself, there was some antipathy at the medical center toward either that position or Dr. Holly. Do you know anything about that, or what would have caused that?
Well, not necessarily, except that Roy was a real planner and a real goer. It could have been that people were afraid that maybe Roy was gunning for the chancellorship or the dean of the medical college. I do not know.
Well, of course, could be too. If I recall my history, there was a period under Dean Poynter here at the
Yes.
medical center or college of
Yes.
medicine, where he very strong. He ran the place sort of out of his hip pocket, as some people
Right.
said, but with very little interference from the university.
anyone else. Yeah.
Then along came Chancellor Gustafson. Dr. Poynter retired,
Yeah.
and from Lincoln more control came.
Yes.
Now, it could be related to that having a Roy Holly there represented more control from Lincoln. I don't know. That's just speculation.
Well, a deanship in the graduate college, as I came to find out later, is merely a position that gives you a chance to be persuasive. You have no money, no real
Yes.
budget usually. And so the most power I ever had in my life was as chairman of the chemistry department. And these were, of course, wonderful days, obtaining both a building and a great grant at the same time. But this certainly firmed up my relationship with Roy Holly, who, of course, was very interested in medicinal chemistry, which I've always been involved with. And we had a lot of fun exchanging information. I figured at that time that Roy really did wish to be a dean of a medical college, in spite of the fact that he had a tremendous research program of his own, was a terrific position. On a personal item, he participated and supervised a major operation of my life.
You knew him on many.
On many levels.
Fronts
We
and
were very
levels,
close
yes.
friends and colleagues.
Yes. He left about, what, the upper 66, 67?
Let's see, he was at the, he went to the Franklin, what was this,
Philadelphia, wasn't
in
it?
Philadelphia Medical College.
Yeah.
And he certainly did become a dean of that school. What he has done since then, I'm not familiar with.
Now, Dr. Cromwell, you mentioned earlier that at a certain point you became executive dean
For graduate studies in research.
for the entire university.
Yeah.
What year was
Now
that?
that was for 2 years, from 1970. I was in this chemistry building I told you about. I never got a chance to even sit down in the beautiful new office. I designed new carpeting and everything. Oh,
You were
boy.
gone when it opened?
I sure was. Chancellor Hardin had tried to encourage me to become dean of the College of Arts and Science along with a committee, and I said, nope, I'm a chemist. I'm going to stay a researcher. But Woody Varner is a very persuasive man, and he finally had the right answer. The one deanship thing I would look at, which was the deanship of the graduate college. For some reason, it had an appeal to me, mainly because I knew that other chemists in the past had been able to maintain their research programs while being dean of a graduate college. So I became executive dean for graduate studies and research, and Dean of the Graduate College. There's a dual title in 1970.
Just an aside, were you able to continue research in chemistry?
I certainly was.
Good.
I always remember I got ready to retire at the end of 2 years. I said, Woody, I've done all I need to do here. We've consolidated a bunch of, we've examined the quality of 45 graduate programs. We consolidated about a half a dozen of them. We've moved one whole program to the medical center. And this is a second interesting thing.
Yeah,
I was very apparently influential, my office was, in moving the whole College of Pharmacy up here. We were ready to blow the whistle on them and put them out of business in graduate work in medical, in pharmaceutical
Well,
science.
let's go right into that. What's the background of that move?
Woody Varner, when he encouraged me to take the position of Executive Dean for Graduate Studies and Research, gave me a charge, and it was that he wished me to examine, along with the help of my elected graduate council, the quality of the graduate programs in all 45 of these programs, with the thought that we could do without some of them, and that we could therefore improve the overall image of graduate work at the University of Nebraska, and not necessarily save any money, but although the legislators and the regents may have thought that would be the case, Woody really wanted to see the quality of the graduate programs improved by any moves we made. So that's what we set out to do. We zeroed in on departments that had not been able to attract departments and colleges that seemed to not be able to attract a goodly number of high-quality graduate students. And it turned out that at that time, pharmaceutical sciences had about 6 candidates over a period of about 6 or 8 years, and it just was not a viable program. Through my contacts with the people at the medical center, both here and in other universities, since I was serving on the advisory committees by that time for the U.S. Public Health Service, experimental therapeutics and pharmacology, cancer chemotherapy, and so forth and so on, I was aware of the fact that the most viable departments of pharmaceutical sciences, as near as I could determine, were those that were associated closely with colleges of medicine. So I started talking to some of my colleagues in pharmaceutical sciences, and I said, look,
this would be nationally or on the campus?
Nationally.
Oh, yes.
I said, nationally, those that are doing the best are those that are closely associated with medical science, because the most active areas in pharmacy today are probably hospital pharmacy. So I said, I'm going to stick my neck out and suggest that you consider moving the whole doggone college. And they'll kill me on O Street when they hear about this. But I think that you would all be better off if you got up to the medical center. You would get in closer to where the money flows, and you would certainly get where the higher quality students are likely to show up. And at least half of the staff in pharmaceutical sciences thought this was a hell of a good idea, and there were others that thought I was terrible.
Where did the dean at that time stand?
Well, fortunately, his name was Gibson.
Right.
And we were good friends, and I don't think that really destroyed it, but he didn't like it at all. But he was retiring. He was retiring that very year, so the timing was perfect, and of course I realized that too.
Now, the mechanics of this, was a committee formed, or?
Well, the regents. We made the recommendation to, when I say we, I mean the graduate council made the recommendation, and its dean, that they consider moving the whole college. That otherwise we were going to have to recommend that this be one of the departments in which the PhD. Well, we didn't use the term terminated. We used the term that this was one of the departments in which we would be recommending that they not be allowed to attract any more be moved to Omaha. This was dramatic.
Yes.
Recommendation.
And it came from the Graduate Council.
This came from the Graduate Council and its dean. It was done.
The regents went along
They
with
went
it.
along with
Was
it.
there ever a faculty vote in the College of Pharmacy that you recall?
I'm not aware of that.
Mhm.
No, but I got. Let me see if I got something. I was proud of this because I thought it would really do things for an area that was needed in the university. Some members of that staff never forgave me for that action, but there's some of them over there now who I think are very friendly.
Yes. What about the rest of the faculties on the Lincoln campus outside of pharmacy? Was there some resistance to this?
I think the vote, I believe the graduate faculty voted on this favorably. I don't remember the size of the vote, but it had to be voted on by the faculty, and it obviously passed. So you bet there was resistance to this and several of the other moves we made that had to do with simply consolidation.
Yes.
I mean, resistance by the graduate faculty.
Mm-hmm.
The graduate faculty determined policy in this university. The dean and the elected graduate council carry out that policy.
Mm-hmm.
And I never forgot that as a dean. That's the way the charter of the graduate college was written.
But as you said, a dean's power is in his powers of persuasion.
Powers of persuasion. He is often been called the academic conscience of a university. And he will be as effective as he is persuasive.
The academic conscience, particularly to administration and
Yes.
regents.
Yes.
Yes. And of course, right about this time, Dean Gibson retired.
He retired.
And
But
Albert Haskell was
Good.
recruited.
But some of the younger members of the staff then, who are here now, thought this was a great idea, and they incidentally have profited. They have obtained grants and attracted graduate students.
Also got a new building.
And they got a beautiful new building, and they're flying pretty high right now.
Now, when you took over, when you became assumed the system-wide position, by this time, of course, the medical center had a number of PhD programs.
Yes.
Was there any action taken in that area, or did that pretty well go along as it was set
Well,
up?
they would come through, and the council would judge the quality of these programs, and they had moved toward quality, in the opinion of the majority of the graduate faculty. So these programs went through. I spent 2 years with the title of executive dean for graduate studies and research and dean of the graduate college, as I said a while ago. And then I decided to resign. This was taking too much time away from my research as a research chemist. I told Woody this, and Woody said, "Oh, I don't know what you're talking about." He said, "We checked up on you the other day. You've been in there 2 years, and you have had published 28 publications in 2 years, which is damn near twice as many as you published in any other 2-year period in your life. So what are you talking about? How'd you do that?" I said, "I guess I must have found time on the flying on the damned airplane between here and Washington to write papers." So he said, "Well, relax." He said, you got much more to do here. I don't want you to leave yet." He said, another challenge, he said, you might add, is to examine the whole way in which graduate research and graduate education is administered at the University of Nebraska. And with a possible an evil glint in my eye, I said, "Yes, sir, we'll do that." And of course, probably neither I nor he realized that what I was really had in mind at the time was to see if there wasn't a way to make my position more or less redundant.
Mm-hmm.
That of assistant vice president. Oh, that's right. I forgot to tell you. He decided that they would change my title to vice president for graduate studies and research and dean of the graduate college.
Mm-hmm.
And I always remember when I told my son this, he said, new title, same old brains.
Yeah. And same responsibility.
Yeah. They changed the title. Well, we went to work on this, the graduate council and I, on how we administered graduate work at the university. The way the council was elected, it was out of date. It needed more representation from the University of Nebraska at Omaha, which was now becoming a much more viable institution for graduate work. Although the regents then and still have more or less determined that they should not directly grant a PhD over there. This has been a long-standing decision on the part of the regents, and they apparently have not yet changed their mind. They might be ready to do that one of these days, but not yet. Yeah, but they they did agree that more PhDs might well be granted in some of the more urgent areas in medicine. So we needed a more representative council. We decided to reorganize the whole way the council was elected, the number of people that would serve on it, and subdivide their duties into smaller working committees. The council was going to be large, about 36 members, so therefore to be effective, it seemed to me they'd have to be divided down to not less than 3 working subcommittees.
Yes.
And this was agreed to. It was also agreed to put more and more responsibility for the direction of graduate work in the hands of campus associate deans. I had associate deans at that time. I had so many of them that people said, "What are you yelling about? You don't have anything to do." I had one on each of the 3 campuses and one sitting in my office. 4 associate deans. And I thought, yeah, that's the way we're going to keep it. And put more and more responsibility for the day-to-day management, the supervision of who should be on the graduate faculty, the looking, reading of transcripts, the admission of students, and get it out of this central office that was in my opinion, too far from where the action was. So this plan was a very large and comprehensive plan for the reorganization of graduate. To the campuses, and the council and I decided that it was ready to go to the faculty for both. Dr. Varner, and I suspect at least some of the administrators, if not all of them, on each of the campuses, did not think it was ready to go to the faculty to vote. I reminded the chancellor that policy in graduate work was determined by the faculties, not by administrators, and that the council, and I agreed with them, thought it was now ready to go to vote. Well, Woody said, "Norm, you're going to lose this one." I said, "Okay, that'll simplify life for all of us, won't it?" Well, the vote came in 4-1 in favor of the proposition that the council had worked up. And the same day I handed him that vote, I also handed him my resignation as Vice President for Graduate Studies and Research and Dean of the Graduate College. I said, "Woody, I've enjoyed this a lot, enjoyed all of you. We've got the job done. I got to get the hell back to chemistry."
But you'd accomplished 2 major things
in 3 years.
Yeah. Which now, what years were those? Were
70 to 73.
Okay.
And got right back to my first love, which is organic chemistry with a special emphasis on medicinal.
Did you go back as a professor, not as a department chairman?
No, as a Regents professor with a 12 months appointment.
Right.
And was very happy to sit there and was quite sure that I would never again enter high-level administration. Woody, at the time, said, Norm, when I got ready to resign, he said, why? He said, you're going to end up as a chancellor of one of these institutions. I said, no, I'm not. I've had it. I love my research too much. Yeah. Well, he said, you've been doing it. I said, yeah, you told me that a few weeks ago. And I have, but I'm getting concerned about my ability to read and think only with the chemists and spend more time with the kids, the students. Mm-hmm. And so I got to do it. Well, he said, you'll probably find your way back in. I said, oh, I don't think so.
He was prophetic.
He was, more than I realized. So
let's go back and really kind of leading up to your present position. Yeah. You, I believe, were involved with the recruitment of Phil Schubeck, Dr. Philippe Schubeck, yeah. And his team from the University of Chicago to the University of Nebraska. Why don't you tell me what you...
in a very peripheral way. I had served on 3 of the study sections in Washington that review research proposals coming from institutions all over the United States. The first one was experimental therapeutics and pharmacology, I mentioned a while ago. And the second was cancer chemotherapy. That was helped form the first cancer chemotherapy study section in the United States. It was one of 5 people that they took out of the old experimental therapeutics and pharmacology study section. And then I was asked, after serving 4 years on that thing, to form the first medicinal chemistry study section as its first chairman. Now, during those years, I saw a lot of good research proposals coming from Dr. Philippe Schubeck's very vigorous group in Chicago, at the old Chicago Medical College,
right,
and was very familiar with the work that was going on there. The thing that that attracted my attention was the uniqueness of their research activities. There were several institutions in the United States engaged in what we call cancer chemotherapy, the development of drugs to treat cancer. Mm-hmm. But here was a group, a vigorous group in Chicago that were busily studying why cancer, what causes cancer. In other words, chemical carcinogenesis, if you please.
Others were studying the chemicals that treat cancer.
They were
studying chemicals that possibly could cause.
Involved in the cause of cancer. And the quality of the work and the quality of the publications coming from that group were, to say the least, outstanding. And I had become quite familiar with the work, and although I had met Schubeck only casually a couple of times, I was very familiar with the work that came from his group and the papers on which his name occurred, along with that of others. So that was the extent of my early knowledge. But suddenly came a decision by administrators here to change the direction of the Eppley Institute that had been in business just a very short length of time. Originally, when it was set up, words had been said with regard to aiming toward improving methods of treating cancer. Mm-hmm. Frankly, I was disturbed about that direction because the competition was too severe. From Sloan Kettering in New York, from the MD Anderson Hospital in Texas, and several other places. And I kept myself thinking that there must be another way to go in cancer research, find out what is the cause of cancer. Maybe there's some way to approach the management of the disease. I started using the word management of disease. I started thinking about immunity factors. And I wrote an article about them based upon a National Sigma Xi lecture that I'd given. I was asked to give a National Sigma Xi lecture, and for some reason I decided to give it on a subject with a rather strange title. It was called Chemical Carcinogens, Carcinogenesis, and Carcinostasis, meaning both the arresting of cancer and the initiation of it might come from the same group of chemicals. And the reason I said that was because I had a group of chemicals that did precisely that had developed from our own research investigations. And so more and more I came to realize that the phenomena of initiation of cancer and the ability to arrest its growth were very closely related metabolic processes and should always be considered together. So I became acquainted with a lot of people in the business, and at that time I pointed out that maybe the real way to go one of these days would be through the approach of immunity, through the use of chemicals maybe to induce immunity, and I said so in this article. And I started reading more and more about what chemical carcinogenesis was all about, and then paid a lot of attention to Dr. Schubeck's work. Suddenly it became known that Phil Schubeck's great group was wanting to get out of Chicago. The hard money was drying up. And about all I had to do with this situation was when Dr. Hardin asked me, what would you say if we were able to move Phil Schubeck to Lincoln, Nebraska, to take over a directorship along with his entire group? And I'd say, my God, it would be like unearthing a bunch of diamonds out in the middle of your cornfield. Yes. He said, I think we can do it. Incidentally, we got one step ahead of the story, you know. I was also very intimately involved in the original initiation of this institution just a few years before. Again, that story is interesting. Dr. Hardin asked if I would help them talk to some people known as the Eppley Foundation, who apparently wanted to grant some money for research in cancer. And the reason he asked me to do that was because I, at that time, had one of the very few research grants from the National Cancer Institute.
Within the university?
Within the university system. And I said, sure. Well, he went to talk to these people here in Omaha. He and Roy Holly, myself,
could have been Dean
a couple
Tolman.
of people from the medical center.
By Dean Tolman, maybe?
Dean Tolman, right. But it was a very small group of people. And these members of the Eppley board. The chairman of that board was a great big tall guy by the name of Elton Laux. Very tough, very hard-hitting, with an MBA from Harvard University. And he started in by saying, well, Dr. Cromwell, he said, I understand you're one of the people involved here that's engaged in cancer research. Have been now for about 10 years. It's my understanding that, from what I hear from Washington, that there's more damn money for cancer than they know what to do with. So why should we put any money into it?
What was the answer?
And I said, you are dead right. There is more money available than there are people to use it. And the reason is because the same people have been there for some time. They all talk to each other. They all ask the same questions. They all come up with the same answers. What's needed are several new institutions that really don't know very much about cancer research to get into the act. We need one of them right here. He said, do you know any of these people in this business? And I said, I know quite a few of them. He looked at Hardin and he said, you're going to turn this young man loose to us for the next 2 weeks. He's going to travel with us around this country, meeting these people. I want to talk to him. I want to find out why in the hell should we spend money in Omaha, Nebraska on this when there are a lot of other great centers where this money could probably be spent and get much more done. Hardin said, Norma, after we got, he said, I don't know whether you put your foot in your mouth or not. And I said, well, I don't think so. Well, he said, I hope you're right. So we start off traveling.
You and Laux and
Reef Snyder. And Prince.
All directors of the Eppley Foundation.
That's a very intimate story. Wherever we stopped, Elton Laux made me sleep in the same damn bedroom with him. He'd wake me up 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and ask me questions. He said, Oh, he was a...
That was an active mind.
Oh,
I bet you all, did you stay in Eppley hotels all the way through?
Yeah, but we couldn't. In Philadelphia, see, we went to Philadelphia and Boston and New York and Washington. Those are the places we stopped. Well, in all these centers, and all these places were cancer research centers of some kind or another. And I was able to introduce him through my early contacts, previous contacts. I was able to introduce him to several of these three gentlemen, to several of the real leaders in cancer research. I'd met them through my contacts on these committees. But there was one guy that I saved for last.
I bet you he was
Sid
head
Barber.
of, yes, I
And
would
I
guess
said,
that.
oh boy, I thought I knew what I was up to there.
Now, identify Dr. Farber.
Well, Dr. Farber, really a very great man. He had established the Children's Cancer Research Foundation in Boston. He was professor of pathology at Harvard University. And really a very great man and a great humanitarian. Very interested in children, extremely sensitive to the patients in his foundation hospital. But he was a great science statesman. And I knew at that time that he was testifying before the Congress in precisely the vein that I was taking with, in the very tone that I was taking with this Eppley Foundation. He had told them that what was needed was the establishment of several new cancer research centers in this country, and that they should find places to do this. I knew that he had said this. I also knew something else that was a private matter. I knew that he was married to a girl by the name of Wallback from Grand Island, a famous family.
Yes.
That owned a big store, so that he at least knew the state.
Yes.
Well, we went to see Dr. Farber, and I had met him several years before as a member of a big review team that had gone there to examine his institute for a sizable research grant for about $3 million from the National Cancer Institute. So we'd gotten well acquainted, and I knew his institute well. But above all, I knew this man's statesmanship and what he was saying to the Congress. Mr. Laux said, Dr. Farber, you have an outstanding research institute here. You're a professor of pathology at Harvard University. These people at Nebraska are trying to convince us that we should establish a research institute for cancer research of some sort out in Omaha, Nebraska, at that medical college they have out there. Why should we spend our money there? Couldn't you use more money for expanding this fine research you're doing with children and discovery of drugs similar to actinomycin, which you people have discovered here in this institution? And the statesmanship of Sid Farber came through. He said that he was sure that they could always use more money at the Children's Cancer Research Center to do more of the things that ought to be done. But he said, Mr. Laux, what is needed if we're going to make more progress with this diabolical disease, this scourge of mankind, is to get more people into the act. More people with brand new, fresh ideas. These were the same things he had said to the Congress, and he said them again. We need to get people that haven't been talking to each other continuously. Now, out in Nebraska, there are just a few of those people out there that have any understanding of what goes on in cancer research. But he said there's some good researchers out there. There's some first-class people in that medical college, surgeons, internal medicine people. Spend your money out at Nebraska. Let's get some new people in the act.
And that
I'm sure was a real thing. I've always thought, what a great thing. I was also delighted when later Dr. Farber was granted an honorary doctor's degree from this institution. It was a thing that should have happened.
Yes. I wondered if he maybe not attended the dedication of the Eppley Institute.
I'm sure
recall
he did.
might have.
Yeah, there's a picture taken on the spading up that soil. I remember I was involved in that picture. Somebody, the NCI director came out when we turned the first shovel full of dirt. So I've been associated peripherally with the
Eppley.
situation since the very beginning and right through.
The Eppley Foundation then, in fact, did give X million dollars.
Yes. That was another thing I tried to have I guess I had an influence. They said, we want a great big fine building. And I said, you won't have to put much of your money in it. What? Oh, I said, there's a Research Facilities Act going on in Washington you don't know anything about. They got lots of money. They'll put it into that. You put your money in a program in people. What do you mean? I said, what's very difficult to get the money for people in program. Establish some lines out there that will be written into perpetuity, some professorships of oncology, if you please, or whatever they want to be called. Put your money in a program and people. Well, I'm not sure I would have agreed they should have done the way they did it, but of course it wasn't a bad idea. As I understand it, the money they gave had to all be spent in over a 20-year period, interest and principal.
Right.
And only a limited amount of it had to go in the building with the understanding that Eppley's name would go on the building. But the bigger chunk of the money came actually from the Research Facilities Act, and that was great.
There was state and federal matching going into the building too.
I think possibly.
I think
yes.
So.
Well, these were exciting times.
Well, then we're back to the decision
Schubeck.
to bring the Schubeck group here.
Right. And that was, to me, really a step in the right direction because we could get a research institution going here that didn't have all the competition in the world. And this was such a big deal that an old friend of mine, Ken Endicott, with whom I had worked in Washington and who by then had risen to the level of the director of the National Cancer Institute, came out. I mean, when you're going to move that much money and effort, but that meant moving not only people, but all their grants and contracts, see, to a strange place, the state of Nebraska. Where
I'm trying to remember, did they have about 50 professionals they brought with them?
I think 100 altogether.
Well, that was
professionals. I would say, well, somewhere between 30 and 50.
I recall at the time
Large
the
number.
science writer for the American Cancer Society
Fantastic.
writing and saying that's the greatest collection of geniuses. How
Everybody-
did you get them?
Yeah, oh yeah. Well, it was terrific.
Yeah. And I recall, I think, because I was sort of in a chauffeuring role then, that I hauled several of them while I was just looking over the place up to your office in Lincoln, and you talked to some of the researchers. So, and you probably, then while Dr. Schubeck was director, remained fairly close to him.
Yes, well, not only close to him. I mean, we were friends. We hunted ducks together in a duck club. But more than that, I associated professionally with several of these people up here in convincing them that we had a series of compounds resulting from our research that were worthy of testing in some of their programs here. And so, and I actually had my people synthesize some specific things for Willie Lashinsky when he was here. I used to swap information with him quite a bit, and he asked us to make a compound for him, and we did that in our heterocyclic chemistry area. Then I also sent substances here to be checked for chemical carcinogenesis, and that was.
So you were working jointly.
Oh yeah, it was a
projects.
professional relationship as well as a friendship relationship, and became acquainted with several members of the staff, and used to come to seminars here, and saw to it that they got invitations to come to our seminars in the chemistry department.
And then the Eppley Institute ran into troubled waters. What is your reaction to what happened?
Well, I really don't know the details enough to discuss it very thoroughly. About all I can say is that when it began to happen, I became very upset, emotionally upset, because not out of any defense strictly of Dr. Schubeck, because I didn't know what was being said, but my major concern was for the survival of this institution and its importance to the state of Nebraska and to the medical center and to the whole university. And so I was quite concerned with regard to our image, not only just locally but nationally, because anything that would blight the image of medical research or any other research heavily funded from Washington, as was this institution, would be damaging to all of us. And so I, of course, was quite concerned that this thing be held in bounds, and I tried to learn what I could about the matter. I really never found out for sure what was going on. The major thing that I kept hearing was, well, there's been a expenditure of overhead funds. Well, good God, was my reaction to that. There is no university in the world that hasn't had the chart that would get large numbers of funds for research that haven't been charged with misspending what's called overhead funds. They're actually called direct cost and indirect costs, and it's a real no-no, for example, to spend so-called monies that are given to you for indirect costs for direct costs, even though all the monies have to do with solving the cancer problem. And frankly, many of us are very nervous and uneasy about this kind of a concern on the part of the government. But the auditors, are very concerned about doing their job and obeying the federal law and all of that, of course. But this upset me very much because...
Well, another thing about this, you get to the public and you hear misappropriation of funds and you think, well, somebody may be stealing or for their own use. And there's never been a question of that. It's whether you used a piece of equipment maybe for this project and you'd already used up your percentage allocation for that sort of thing.
A bunch of falderall. The big question is, what's happening with regard to the needs of the people, which is to have this disease attacked and approached. So if you use a piece of equipment that was purchased by a federal contract to solve a problem that was authorized for study by a federal grant, or even by the American Cancer Society, which is a private foundation, are you doing the humanity wrong? Not really. You're not doing anything wrong at all so far as the approach to solving, to our major mission, which is to solve the cancer problem. You, though, may be judged to be doing things wrong so far as the management of monies are concerned from that particular institution. But I guess maybe like many other scientists, I find it difficult to get too sympathetic with that approach. I understand that auditors have to live by rules and regulations in order to some people say to justify their existence and maintain their own jobs, but there's more than that in order to satisfy the Congress that there hasn't been mismanagement. One of the things about spending indirect cost funds for direct cost funds that came up often, and I remember, you have to remember, I told you I sat on the other side of the table. I was on fund recommending groups in Washington. It did make us mad, maybe, when people would do research with overhead money that we had said, no, it isn't, we don't think qualified for our support. And they would then, and therefore we would line out research in this area or that area, which probably we shouldn't have done, but we did do. And then they would use so-called indirect cost funds or overhead funds to do that. Now, the government have dug a pit for themselves on this one. They have decided to call some overhead funds excess overhead funds. And ever since I heard that term, I thought, I can't understand why the Congress doesn't go right down their throat and say, what do you mean by excess overhead funds? Does that mean you don't have enough brains down here to decide what should be allowed for overhead funds? So it's an excess overhead fund? Well, there's where these monies have been declared excess overhead funds that have been fed back to departments, including Eppley Institute, to do some things that they want to do. And if it turns out if some of those things they want to do were things that the government said, no, we won't give you money to do, then people in Washington get cross about this. But this becomes, in my opinion, really a very debatable issue. I mean, it is not all black and white. And you finally get down to where you say, is humanity being benefited or damaged? Who can judge that? So therefore, I am concerned about this examination and this general situation.
Kind of interesting. Somebody once said that, I mean, during this entire investigation, nobody's ever questioned
About
the scientific
merit
of what they do.
And so finally, as I said in a newspaper interview recently, the fact that after all this has gone on, the whole medical center had a 20% increase in funds they received from outside agencies last year. And Eppley Institute's funds didn't go up that dramatically, but they did go up some 4 or 5%.
Mm-hmm.
I guess maybe one would have to conclude that the fund granting agencies haven't decided that this is a poor place to spend money here at Nebraska at the medical center.
When were you first approached about becoming acting director? Do you recall, and who approached you?
Gee, I'm not then sure. Let's see. February. I'm looking. Oh, it must have been earlier than that. Here. Let's see. Where's Jack Kennedy's article here? Here it is. Wednesday, March the 7th, the Lincoln Journal wrote an article entitled "Cromwell's on the List."
How did they know you were on the list for a
Kennedy is a real bird dog.
Yeah.
Well, I guess at that time Mike Sorrell had been mentioned. This was quite an article. Jack Kennedy did a great job on this. You see, that means that right at the end of February, Dr. Vanslow had come down to Lincoln to talk to me, and I guess had discovered that I was at least interested enough to talk about it. I used to tell people there wasn't 25% chance that I would be the acting director up here, because I didn't think there was more than a 50% chance that I would be asked, and there was probably not more than 50% chance that I would accept if asked.
Well, why were people speculating before anybody had asked you that you might become acting director?
As early as the Regents meeting in February, it was known that Dr. Schubeck would begin a leave of absence on July the 1st. It was apparently rumored that they would appoint an acting director, and the two people that were apparently on the list at that moment that were mentioned in this article was Mike Sorrell of internal medicine and myself. And all I had to say that to Jack Kennedy was that Dr. Vanslow did ask to review the situation with me and try to feel me out about the acting directorship and Eppley's future. Vanslow was in Washington, unavailable to comment to Jack Kennedy. Street, 12 months appointment, able to do whatever I wanted to do, but what I always wanted to do, and always did, was to teach not less than one undergraduate course and one graduate course each year, and run my really sizable research group.
Now, when you had this not come up, would you have continued on for X number of years?
Oh, sure, yeah, I had decided
So there was no...
that my research program was still going, and I'm still running it to an limited extent. It's a small program at this moment, but I go down every week and spend not less than one day. I'm supposed to spend about 25% of my time on the Lincoln job, and I do so.
So you're a commuter?
Yeah, I try to make a few trips as possible each week, but I'm usually there. I usually make one round trip a week. Sometimes it turns out to be two if there are other kinds of meetings that I have to attend as the president.
So at the second meetings when, you know,
That's when
Lancelo
it
more or
really
less said...
More or less came to an agreement. Yeah, let's see.
Which would have been about when? Would that have been February or
Well,
March?
They made it happened. It was in March, I think, that the recommendation for the appointment was made. Yep. So it would have been in the middle of March. This all happened in March.
What kind of a charge did he give you? Yeah, I don't know if that's the correct word, but what did he expect you to do in words? Do you recall anything?
No, he was very careful not to make any suggestions as to what he expected me to do in the job, except I remember he made the statement that he didn't expect me to simply be an interim type individual, that he expected that there would be some suggestions for a change in program, new program, and that's what I've tried to do, is to try to introduce some new ideas. We got started in cooperation with others in the medical center on what we hope will be an important new program in toxicology. Just tomorrow is a symposium going on here in the center. The chancellor's been quite interested in supporting the development of a toxicology program in general. You see, we in Eppley have a real leg up on that, because chemical carcinogenesis is simply the most dramatic and until recent times the most heavily funded area of chemical toxicity. So chemical carcinogenesis is simply the most dramatic form of chemical toxicity, but not necessarily the most dangerous at all.
Yes.
Because some of these chemicals that will cause cancer will also cause rather sudden death, vis-a-vis the nitrosamines, as was demonstrated in that murder that took place in Germany and also here in Omaha.
When you came, all right, when did you then assume the acting
The 1st of
directorship?
July of '79.
How did you find the place, morale-wise and all, when you got here?
I was amazed to find that there was as much interest in science going on, a conversation on science, as there was, and that the people, at least that I talked to, that seemed to approach me first, were still excited about their science and the obtaining of grants quite recently and publications. So I couldn't really feel at the outset a morale problem. But after I'd been here a little while, people began to talk to me about those guys, and by that they would mean people that disagreed with them on conduct of affairs in the Institute. When one says conduct of affairs, I find it difficult sometimes to see just what it is that they are objecting to in their colleagues' behavior. But very often it turns out that they feel they have been neglected, salary-wise or space-wise. Space and salary seem to be the two major areas of conflict.
That isn't just unique to the Eppley Cancer Institute.
And I can say that I investigated some of these allegations of mistreatment on salary, and actually recommended the adjustment of a few of these in term, and these took place. I participated and encouraged the solution of some of the space requests operating through a space committee, which I appointed. Two or three things I did immediately was appoint a so-called space committee that could wait upon these people, listen to their complaints, and field their requests. I also appointed an advisory committee that consists of a considerable number of people representing several levels, not just the professors, but associate professors as well, from several different disciplines here: pathology, chemistry, analytical chemistry, organic chemistry.
If there are, in fact, two factions existing at the Institute, did you have members of both factions on there? Or?
I had, yes, one member, a powerful member of the faction on there, but when an action took place that I thought was very, very discourteous and in my opinion, disruptive of the affairs of the institution, we had decided the chancellor had asked if he could come and talk to the advisory committee, and I had said yes, I thought that would be a good idea. And we had made an arrangement for him to come and see the advisory committee, and it was announced to the advisory committee. And a group of people, 5 people who have been identified as the so-called dissidents here, one of whom was a professor who was a member of the advisory committee, decided in their wisdom to confront the chancellor in the hallway on his way over here with a 2-page petition in which they requested that he not hold a meeting with just the advisory committee, but only when all the staff were present, especially themselves. And in their petition they also said several things that were certainly derogatory to the advisory committee, like they had not addressed themselves to any of the major problems of the institution. In this petition they handed the chancellor that they said this advisory committee had not really taken up any of the important problems confronting the institution and were really not doing anything very useful. Well, I thought this was of course not true, and I thought it was a very odd statement to make, in which one of the members of the advisory committee was signed such a statement as this. So I decided that he would find it uncomfortable continuing to serve with the advisory committee, and I removed him from that committee. And that was a major representative of the dissident group, apparently one of their major spokesmen. And so, and I have not added any of these people back because I personally still consider them disruptive, and I do not think they're working in the best interest of the institution. But this is a very serious problem. I'm going to try to find another way. I'm suggesting that a way be found to maybe have an elected executive committee to help in the administration of this. Now, this is nobody has ever heard me say this, but you and one other person. I've talked to one of the younger members, not a dissident, to explore the idea of developing an elected executive committee. This is the sort of thing that it doesn't happen too often in medical centers. And medical centers are much more
Undemocratic.
Undemocratic than
That's the
the
word.
colleges of arts
Yeah.
and science, which is where my background
I think
comes.
that's changing, but I think
And
you're
so
right.
I'm going to explore this matter, because if Eppley should develop an elected executive committee, then this might pull the teeth of some of these dissidents, and they would either shape up or ship out, because they would not be able to resist probably the scorn of the majority of their colleagues if it was an elected group that
Right.
spoke. And we'll explore this. I at the moment find that there are about 5 people who are classified as dissidents, and there are at least 10 to 11 who will vote contrary to them at the moment. So this is a rather sizable majority in disagreement with them. Sizable majority of associate and full professors.
Right. So this is partly philosophical and maybe general, but can a scientific institute be divided because of different approaches?
Oh, yes,
Just
but
in a real layman's language, like maybe one group believes viruses cause cancer and another one environmental, and so can these types of tensions grow that strong from a scientific standpoint?
yes, but that doesn't appear to be the nature of this disagreement
Right.
that's going on here. I do not yet really understand the basis of this problem. I think it falls upon goes down to much more basic human problems.
There was
Money, salary,
money, salary,
position,
space, and
recognition.
who gets promoted and all.
Yeah.
But, there's always been the talk occasionally that perhaps certain militant environmentalist groups nationally or whatever are opposed to some of the work done here. Do you feel that? Or?
No, but I think that it's true that there are some of the Johnny-come-latelys in the area of environmental control that have been trying to usurp some of the prerogatives of the National Cancer Institute,
Yes.
who support the work here.
Yes.
So, and there is a national conflict on that score.
Because
But
people have suggested that the Eppley Institute might just be caught in a war between two national groups. I don't.
Yeah, but we're
I'm not involved.
maybe we're gonna become a prostitute and serve both sides,
both
because we're
You're
moving.
interested in science.
Yeah,
the
that
truth.
we are. We're interested in helping in the general area. I am, at least, and some of my colleagues in the general area of toxicology, chemical toxicology, whether it leads to cancer or simply early death.
Right. What do you see as the future here?
Well, I really,
Against it.
if these people will settle down, I think the Eppley Institute could continue to remain a very major research arm of the entire university system, and that it can, through collaboration with especially the College of Agriculture and maybe the Department of Chemistry in Lincoln, develop a first-class program that would appeal to the legislature for direct support of the Eppley Institute, especially in the area of toxicology, because toxicology problems are of great importance in herbicides, fertilizers, fungicides. In other words, lots of agricultural problems are associated with toxicology problems. And I believe that we can make a real contribution to helping the state solve some of its close local problems in those areas, and therefore be worthy of support by the state, and that this should be centered, in my opinion, here in the medical campus, and that the Eppley Institute can play a very major role in this area, because there are more people knowledgeable in the area of toxicology probably at the moment in the Eppley Institute than anywhere else in the entire university. So we can take real leadership in this area, and to me this is very exciting, because boy, this is we can make basic fundamental contributions in this area, and go beyond the scare tactics and the publicity Sunday supplement approach to life by designing meaningful, reproducible experiments here in Eppley and elsewhere in the medical center. They'll really help the agricultural industry manage its affairs better, so that they will not be subject to attack, feedlot runoff, contamination of water supplies, which is an issue right now that is of some concern, that maybe over-fertilization is building up too much nitrate, for example, in water. Now, I think this is a very exciting an area for expansion, and that the Eppley Institute can well make a contribution there, and it ought to be continued and probably expanded in the years ahead.
You know, this tape is for history, and so the answer to the next question, however you answer it, is going to be when somebody listens to it years down the road, they'll know. But how much longer do you expect to be acting director?
Well, my only answer to that would be, if I'm asked, I guess I would stay on as long as my health holds and I'm as excited about this area of work.
I gather you're
I guess
enthusiastic
I would
about
stay.
it.
Oh yes.
Have we missed anything that you can think of that we ought to?
No, not that I think of. I think I've already pointed out that if I am around here another year or so, attention is going to have to be given to getting these people, all of them, wanting to work with each other, and that no small group feels neglected and left out of things. And maybe this can be approached through an elected
Executive Committee. Well, thank you, Dr. Cromwell, for your time and for your insights into a lot of aspects of the university.
Enjoy it.